Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new edition of Irrespective. We'd like to talk a little bit this evening about a concept that has been ruminating, or we've been ruminating about in the last couple of days, especially considering many of the events that have transpired and the conversations that are happening amongst Christians. And it is whether or not Christianity undermines Christianity. We will get to the premise of why we are asking this question shortly, but before we begin our conversation, for those of you that might be joining us for the first time, my name is Gio. This is my father and co-host, and I'm his co-host, Jesus.
Good evening, friends. And I guess tonight we will be talking about that old saying that goes more or less like this. There are different versions. I guess at the end of the day, I am my own worst enemy.
Mhm.
And we're going to focus on some of the things that Christians are doing by misinterpreting the Bible that actually hurts our place in society.
Again, we had said a couple of days ago that we were done talking about the Charlie Kirk assassination and the after effects because there's other things that we need to get to. However, we have noticed increasingly online that it seems as if many Christians have not stopped speaking about the matter. There are still many questions that they have pertaining to issues that arise from all of that event. And we've heard from pastors also, plenty of them whom are still fielding questions and concerns from their congregants about some of these things. And we thought, what better way to address some of the public declarations, statements, the spirit of those declarations, the things that are going on behind the scenes that propel these decisions from people whom are now in the spotlight and whatnot, that to actually get to the crux of the issue here. And the reason that we ask the question, does Christianity undermine Christianity, is because we have seen an influx, and this has been happening for decades, by the way, but we are beginning to experience now more than ever the effects necessarily of thinking that we have abided by Christian doctrine when in fact there have been ideas that have been subversively and subtly made their way into the church that have put Christians at a disadvantage. I'll say that once again. Some will think that we are asking the question as if rhetorically that we're saying that Christianity necessarily undermines Christianity. That is not our position. Our position is that people misinterpret certain things about what the Bible has to say or about Christianity proper, and then they don't look necessarily at the effects that that will have until it's much too late. They begin to suffer it in their own flesh, and then they kind of clap back at God. They clap back, so to speak, at the Bible saying, but this is what you teach, when in fact, they got at that place of putting Christianity, their own faith, at a disadvantage because of the misinterpretations that they have of the text. That's what we're going to talk about this evening.
And here's the thing. A lot of people, since we start looking at the macro picture and then bring it down to the micro picture, they go like, I don't get it. I don't understand why you guys are tackling this issue. For example, there is an obvious battle for the human soul. Satan wants your soul. He wants to destroy you. And by destroying you, I don't mean that the only thing he's interested in is taking you to hell. I'm talking about in this life, destroying your soul to the point that you represent God in no way, shape, or form. We are supposed to be representing the fact that humans have been created in the image of God. But when he manages to distort that, then he's kind of won a big battle there. So when I said there's a battle for your soul, you need to understand how it plays out in the macro, in the large picture. And then once you understand that, you go, I can see how that is going to take its toll on me, on my kids, on my grandkids. So I get it. A lot of people don't see that far ahead of themselves, that far ahead. They can't seem to look up. And so we take criticism, but that's just the way it is. I just got a letter a few days ago from a previous congregant saying now, so many years later, that she just wanted to thank me for being an eye-opener of sorts as we did our work in the pastoral ministry for so many years, talking about the things that have been going on with the Muslims within the country. But back then, when these things were being preached, when I was preaching these things, they were not popular. Furthermore, people left church because you had the Rick Warrens of life saying, no, we must have a Chrislam of sorts. And I'm shortening my presentation here because time is of the essence, the attorneys would say. But
while they charge you a lot for
absolutely,
the time that
yeah,
take up
a fraction of an hour means an hour. But anyway, it's important that you try to see why we look at the big picture, because it trickles down to the point that it then destroys your soul, the soul of your family, your children's soul, and so on and so forth.
Yes. Now that you mentioned that email, because the contents of that email, of course, they are private, but you did share some details about it, and it actually fits in with what we're talking about this evening, because we'd like to use as a primary example of what we're talking about this evening. And by the way, I'd like to encourage the audience to come back on Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, because we're specifically going to have a conversation about how the words tolerance, unity, and openness have been used to subvert Christianity. The thing is that Christians have adopted that idea as if it's necessarily inherently part of Christianity, because those whom were presenting such concepts as necessarily Christian weren't Christians. This began happening in the early 20th century. But the idea there was to get Christians to be more accepting and open themselves and even tolerating things that eventually will come for Christianity itself. In a sense, we're giving a bit of a primer to what we'll talk about on Sunday this evening. But hopefully the example that we give the audience this evening will it will give you a practical reality of how this eventually plays out, where these ideas, these ideologies, these doctrines, they may seem hazy, and they seem, or at least the presenters of the same, will say they're good. They necessarily align with Christian values. However, in practice, you begin to see how not only they're actually meant for the destruction of Christianity, but of Christians themselves.
And if I may say something, Gio, and I think it'll be very important and relevant to what we're tackling tonight. 12 out of the 13 colonies in their constitutions, they had mentioned Christ, and it was important for them, for these colonists, or the 12 out of the 13, one was Catholic, the rest were Protestant.
Why didn't we throw out that colony to begin with?
That Christ be the center. So as we are talking about the issues that we will be talking about, keep in mind the launch pad, how we started, basically not a Judeo-Christian nation, right, a Christian nation, because even the thought of Judeo-Christian is brought in later.
Yep.
It was about Christ. So when today we are it's almost demanded of us that we celebrate any other culture, all cultures except the one that got this country started, which is Christian-based. You have to
wonder.
That's
intentional.
Oh, absolutely. So you have to wonder exactly what is going on, and at the end, how does this trickle down to me as an individual? How does it trickle down to me as a mom, a dad, our family, our kids, our grandkids? These are the questions that we are tackling. Whether popular or not, we really don't care. We know that the Holy Spirit is leading us, and we must tackle these things ahead of time. And again, I'll mention it one more time. Years later, 10 years, 15 years on down the line, then we get the letter saying, oh, you guys were calling these things way ahead of your time. I think we're doing the same thing now.
Yes.
So if you pay attention, you will save yourself a lot of headaches.
Case study, NewYorkPost.com. It was reported locally on a local news station in Detroit, but it became national headlines because the clip itself went viral of Dearborn's Muslim mayor tells Christian he's not welcome in debate on honoring pro-terror Arab leader. At a Dearborn City Council meeting last week, this was a few days ago, by the way, just to give everyone some heads up here as to when this was originally published, Mayor Abdullah H. Hammoud, that certainly is a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant name, told local resident...
Not even close to Smith or Jones?
Correct. Jefferson. Told local resident Edward Ted Barnum, a Christian, or Barham, I'm sorry, Barham, a Christian, that he was not welcome in the city after Barham raised concerns about new street signs honoring Arab-American news publisher Osama Sibliani. Fox 2 Detroit reported that the signs honoring Sibliani, which, by the way, give you a heads up here, one of the street names that they decided to replace, the name was of Joseph Warren. Joseph Warren was one of the earliest combatants in the American Revolution and considered a hero for his exploits early on in the American Revolution. Most people saw him as a martyr for the cause of independence against Britain. And the street that now the Muslims in the city, more specifically those that belong to the city council and the mayor, have proposed and have changed the name of that street, replaces, as it were, Joseph Warren Drive.
So you erase that, you erase history, the next generation has no idea, no clue of what happened, and all of a sudden this guy is exalted. And by the way, this mayor is talking about the unity and the amount of diversity they have in this city, which I'll give you some stats, because most people think that Dearborn, Michigan is 88% white.
No, it's not.
And the reality is it's 54.5% Arab, but they get counted as whites. And so when you see the numbers, you're fooled.
It's deceiving.
Absolutely. So keep this in mind. He talks about diversity, and then he tells this guy, I want you out of here. You're not welcome here, to the point that the day you decide to leave, I'll throw a parade.
Well, long story short, Barham complains to the city council. We have the video here. It's a clip. Take a listen to how the mayor responds.
I mean, Hezbollah, bombed the embassy.
Let me pause. As a matter of fact, I apologize, but I have to pause here because to give you further context, Sibliani, although he's an editor-in-chief and a publisher of a local Arab newspaper for the local residents of Dearborn, the guy has openly praised Hezbollah and praised Hamas, saying that they're freedom fighters and whatnot. And therefore, this Christian man, along with others, have raised concerns that there's an Islamization, as it were, going on, and they're not wrong on the matter.
So why don't we quote?
Correct.
Why don't we quote the guy? He talks about how the blood of martyrs irrigates the land of Palestine. This is the guy that is getting the streets named after him. Whether we are in Michigan and whether we are in Yemen, believe me, everyone should fight within his means. They will fight with stones. Others will fight with guns. Others fight with planes.
Wow, that's
9/11,
interesting allusion, right? But these guys are supposedly Americans, because remember what politicians tell us. As
Drones
long as you
and
become a
rockets.
citizen. Yeah, as long as you're a citizen, you're an American. That's just downright foolish.
This is the guy that is getting exalted, and he's talking about basically bringing terrorism wherever it needs to be brought in so that the Muslims can have their way.
So this is the interaction that ensues when this Christian, among others, express their concerns about the renaming of the street.
In Beirut, and including many Americans. So I just feel it's quite inappropriate.
You are an Islamophobe. And although you live here, I want you to know, as mayor, you are not welcome here. And the day you move out of the city will be the day that I launch a parade celebrating the fact that you moved out of the city, because you are not somebody who believes in coexistence.
So let me see if I understand certain things. This man is a taxpayer. He is part of the city or the township that Abdullah represents. Presumably, the mayor would say that he is for all of the residents that are taxpayers and he represents all of them. But here we have the mayor actually favoring a person whom is presumably of his own ethnicity and his own ideology, more specifically religious ideology. And then he calls the Christian a so-called Islamophobe and against unity and whatnot. But yet he himself, being mayor, is showing no unity, showing no tolerance, showing no ability to actually say, well, I respect your beliefs, and although I might have my disagreements personally with you, I am your mayor and I still represent you. So here we go, starting to point out, as it were, one of the things that has actually led to the diminishment of Christianity. Christians thinking, as it were, that these arguments are being done in good faith by the people whom actually want their destruction. Because let's face it, Islam, although they won't admit it, because Islam permits its adherents to lie so that they would conquer. It's called taqiyya or taqiyya. Here we have a guy whom now, in an unguarded moment, shall we say, expresses his outrage against this Christian and says what he truly feels about believers.
But here's the thing, and you were talking about, and I was talking about Christians hurting themselves. Here's the thing that hurts us. Many of you will say, are thinking, or maybe even saying, this doesn't touch me. This is just a small city somewhere out there. I don't care. It doesn't touch you until it touches you.
Right.
It doesn't hurt you until it hurts you.
Yeah.
So when you keep brushing things off because this is far away, this has nothing to do with me, there's so many millions of people here, this never gets to me, then it gets to you, and you go, what can I do now? The only thing you can do then, you won't like it, but I'm going to say it, is flush.
Yes.
Because at a certain point, it's too late.
I completely agree with you, because this is one of the things that undermines Christianity. So the dismissal of the warnings, of the fair warnings. Let me use another example. I was going to leave this for Sunday, but I think it's important that we talk about it now. We have a group of people that have taken over Dearborn, Michigan, that have nothing in common with the founding stock of the nation, as well as the persons that have emigrated into this country, because they do exist. We are living proof.
And this is why I mentioned the 13 colonies, 12 out of the 13 having a Christian foundation.
Right.
All of a sudden, it's been removed, and now we're supposed to embrace this while they're kicking us out.
Well, but what was it that certain people, a small segment, by the way, was arguing against this whole concept of openness in the 1950s and 60s, when Christians were saying, hold on, do you really want to bring in a group of people whose religious faith actually calls for the destruction of Christianity and conquering a nation.
And how many people paid attention to that warning?
People were saying, like Rick Warren saying, dismiss the zealots, dismiss the haters, dismiss the racists. They were classified, people like us, were classified as, vilified as all sorts of evil things, when in fact the warnings, people did not heed them. They paid attention to the Rick Warrens of life and other squishy preachers on the matter, saying, let's just talk about the gospel, let's not talk about these issues. And now they're here on our shores, and Christians are suffering for it. So once again, we have an example, because I know what's going to happen. Some people will now try to dovetail their misinterpretation of the Bible. But doesn't the Bible say that we have to love our enemies? Doesn't the Bible say that we have to pray for those that persecute us? Do you not understand, dear Christian, that it is not illegitimate? All the opposite is true. It is a commandment to protect those of your own household, to ensure that you have peace and tranquility. There's a particular reason why Paul commands that Christians pray for those in eminence, for those in power, so that we may live peaceable lives, says the Apostle Paul. Evidently, that also reaches into policy making, into decision making. And when you're taking persons from the third world whom are inherently antagonistic against that way of life, whom want to subvert it, who actually take those ideas that they are fleeing from and then try to impose the very thing that they're fleeing from, the very oppression that they're fleeing from, against those that are hosting them, don't you think that that necessarily then is an anti-Christian thing that needs to be resisted? But a lot of Christians, to their great shame, said, no, I don't want to be counted with the racists. I don't want to be counted with the haters. I'd rather be seen as a nice person and accepting. And then here you have this very same subversive element, destructive element on our shores.
So antagonistic sounds so nice, Gio. It's almost poetic. They hate us.
Yes.
Let's
Absolutely.
just use a 4-letter word.
Yep.
They hate us. And here you are going, no, we need to create a space for them.
Unity
Once
is what
you
we need.
create a space for them, you know
foolish.
what's going to happen? Your space is gone.
It's gone. But
gone.
his words prove it. I'm glad you're mentioning that, because his words prove
But
it.
some of the Christians that we have known throughout the years will say something to the effect of, okay, so our space is gone and God glorified his name in our space being gone. These are the same people that then go on to say, since we don't have any space in the public schools, then we'll send our kids to private education. And then the public schools say, you will do our curriculum, and since you don't want our school system, we'll bring our school system to you. We're going to stick it to you. And Christians are always retreating, and they don't seem
Under
to
the
get,
auspices, to your point, under the auspices is that this is what we're supposed to do.
they're hurting themselves to the point of tonight's program all the time. And when they do this, they don't have the decency to say, we damaged ourselves, did we
Correct.
not?
And we damage the gospel in a sense.
Absolutely.
Because if you think about it, it's inherently, some will say that this operates out of ignorance, but I'm just going to say it's downright malicious, because the effects are malicious. When you take a place like the United States at one point was honoring of God, I get it. We have our national sins. Every country has its national sins. But when you have, as it were, a light unto the nations, like the United States has been, because the Christians decided to make the United States a light unto the nations, and suddenly you open it to elements that are inherently subversive of the gospel, what do you expect? Do you think that God would look upon that lightly, especially when a Christian, under the auspices of, I have to show love to my neighbor? So you're showing love to an oncoming enemy who wants your destruction. You're showing love to him by saying, go ahead and kill me and my family. What happens to the love that you have for your family? Now you're basically saying that you love your enemy more than you love yourself and more than you love your family. I know what some people will say, but doesn't the Bible call me to do that? No, the Bible does not call you to do that. The Bible calls you to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And let me say something which is going to be shocking to some of you, but I'm still going to say it. In reality, you have to love yourself first before you can even love your neighbor. That is the pecking order of the
preface.
thing. That is the preface. Exactly. You love your neighbor as you love yourself.
So let's give an example so people will get a better idea of what we're talking about, because sometimes I think that all preachers can get wordy, and then people will go like, what are they saying? In Dearborn at 5:30, the call to prayer and prayers are blasted to the point that you're going to have to listen to it or get some kind of insulation to your house where you can block that out.
While-
But you
while
can't
you-
go to the corner and preach Christ.
While you say that, here it is. That's Dearborn, 5:30 in the morning.
That's your neighborhood if this continues going the way it's going.
5:30 in the morning, and they blast that 5 times a day against local ordinances.
So go ahead and get yourself in the corner and preach the gospel there. Try to preach the gospel there and see what happens. All of a sudden, it seems to be far away, but now it's starting to make sense. I hope for some of you who are saying, that's so far away, that's just a little city, it's not going to reach me. It's reaching you already in most cities. If you go to a corner to preach the gospel, a cop is going to be sent your way telling you, do you have a license to be here? Did you pull a permit? No, get out of here. Otherwise, you're a public nuisance and we don't want to hear from you.
Well, the local police chief, who's white, recently came out in a press conference saying that he was overjoyed that the local police department is now even reflecting the so-called ethnicity of the city of Dearborn, or the township of Dearborn, when he says about 55%, now half of our force, is Arab American. This is something to be proud of.
So what is he really saying? I get to keep my job.
Right, but at the same time, if you think about it, when you're gonna look at this now, I know some of you might not like what I'm about to say, but now think about the people that he displaced under the name of, we just have to give jobs to Arab Americans here. Who were the people that eventually those jobs taken away from to be given to these people whom religiously, ideologically are actually opposed to the system that we have and was created by Christians.
And again,
in
at the
United
core of
States.
what we're tackling tonight is the fact that Christians displace themselves.
Yep.
And while doing so, they don't even have the decency, the honesty of saying, yeah, we did this to ourselves.
Yep.
No, they turn to God.
And to their progeny.
Yes.
And to their progeny.
Yes, very good point. And so they turn to God and go like, you failed us. God never failed us.
Yeah.
We failed ourselves.
Exactly.
We failed God.
Exactly. You never see any of these sorts of things in scripture being bandied about by Christ or by Paul or by the apostles. If anything, you see all the opposite. And this is why that sort of messaging gets so attacked by very many people.
You know, many Christians think that a guy like Rick Warren is like a hero. And Muslims are saying, what a tool.
He is a tool.
Let's use him. And when we have no further use for him, we'll discard him. And this is exactly the way it has gone with people like Rick Warren, the Benny Hinns of life, all the people that signed on to Catholics and evangelicals together.
Tony Campolo, all those guys, right?
Yes, we can go on.
Schuler,
And on
I don't know
and
how
on.
many times you talked about Schuler being, in essence, a menace when you think about it, an existential menace to Christianity by the things that he taught.
Eventually, when you read his books and you listen to some of his sermons, you go like, this guy is actually saying that psychology and positive thinking replaces Christianity, but he'll keep a veneer of Christianity so he can continue to draw the old people that he drew to his church in California, so they will continue to give. That was the game. That was the play.
Sure. A couple of last things before we begin to conclude this edition. By the way, we hope that you'll join us on Sunday, because now we're going to take this particular example and we're going to pan out and have the meta conversation, meaning the principal conversation of the essential ideas that were promoted by the likes of Karl Popper. These are names you've not heard before, but we're going to introduce them to you on Sunday as the progenitors of this idea, which inherently sought to undermine Christianity.
So if what we're doing seems a bit different to you, it is, because you're used to going to church, singing a couple of songs, having the preacher preach down your throat, picking up the offerings and go home. Everything is honky-dory. What you're listening is different, because the time that we are living in is different and we have to take on these issues. So hopefully you can see how the Holy Spirit is trying to warn you, like he warned Israel over and over and over and over again, and it went whoop, whoop, in one ear, out the other, and they paid the price. Hopefully we can present these things carefully enough, detailed enough, to the point that you go, I best pay attention, and not just pay attention so as to keep information inside you. I'm going to implement the things that I need to implement.
It's a great point. The last example I'd like to give for this edition is the follow-up. Eventually, there was so much controversy over this thing that they had another city council meeting. And I'm just going to give you the short story of what happened. The mayor was given a couple of minutes to say, something in response to all of the controversy. In essence, he refused to apologize, and he doubled down on calling Barham a hater, a person whom is an isolationist, all the typical pejoratives that they use to try to discount someone with a substantive.
Because if you dislike something today, you have a phobia. Let's just say you don't like carbohydrates for whatever reason. You don't like carbohydrates. You're a carbophobe.
Carbohydrate phobia.
What? I'm a carbophobe. Yes, you are. Whatever you dislike, you just happen to dislike it. I don't like this. No, you've got a phobia.
You know what Barham says to him in the first meeting after this happens, and in the second he says, Mayor, God bless you. Wait, hold on. Why would I send something that is exclusively for believers and amongst believers to a person whom is an enemy of Christ? Why do I want God's blessings upon a person whom is a hater of Jesus Christ, whom hates his people. But doesn't the Bible call us to say that? Where? I would challenge you to look up in the text. See, this is the problem. Where does it say that in the text? But it says to pray for those that persecute you. Pray. Pray.
And
It
even
doesn't
if
say
it
to
says
send
to
blessings.
bless, even if it says to bless, the original idea behind bless is not to speak truth. Don't lie about people. So as long as we are speaking truth, we're actually blessing people. We're saying
Correct.
what has to be said. Because the concept, Gio, of blessing and cursing, it gets misconstrued because once we bring it to our own language, we go, bless you means I want you to prosper even though you are killing all of us.
Right.
The idea is not to speak lies, not to bring forth false testimonies.
Yeah.
I will bless you, okay? I'll say the truth about you. And if the truth happens to be something that you don't like or something that people don't like because it proves that you are evil and you are all the things that I'm saying you are, then I have not cursed you.
Yeah.
I have not defamed you. I have not said anything against you. All that I have said is the truth. This is your behavior. These are the things that you have said. These are the things that you have done. So don't bring that thing about I must bless you. I must ask God to put a seal of approval on your conduct, which he has said in his word over and over. I abhor that. I detest that. And yet we go around saying, Lord, put your seal of approval upon this evil guy because this is the way I bless him.
Yeah. And then what does Barham do in the second meeting? He goes up, he gives a chat. To his credit, he says, you know, if we're going to talk about unity here, then why don't you and I go, for example, to Arab countries and give space, as it were, for Christians to preach the gospel? They shut him down. To his credit, I'll give Barham credit, but he says this before. He says, the Bible says, I've been told by Christians that I should sue because my rights are being infringed upon. I'm not going to do that because we have to show love to our enemies. What does that have to do with the fact that you've got a subversive element that just because you're a Christian, now they're not recognizing your rights? Do we have to go back to Acts where Paul had to reassert his rights as a Roman citizen so that he wouldn't be killed? What do you mean that all of a sudden this is beyond ourselves? It's almost that we're going above, it's beneath us, as it were, to use the law in order to protect Christian interests in a country that was originally designed by and for Christians. This is a sort of cowardice, folks, that unless we get over it quickly, we're not only going to lose the heritage that was passed down to us from people whom were brave to pass these things down and brave many things in order to pass this down to us. We're not going to leave anything for our kids. And boy, I think the Bible's very specific on this, where it says cowards will not inherit the kingdom of God.
I don't have anything else to add.
We'll talk more about this meta conversation, like I said, on Sunday, and we hope that you'll join us then, where we're going to be talking about how inherently openness, unity, all those buzz terms that are used nowadays as supposedly Christian actually have worked out against Christianity to subvert it. We hope you'll join us then at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Please do not forget to donate. It helps us to continue to put out this content for your edification. You will find that there is a QR code that just appears on the screen. Please take a photo with it, as it were, or scan it with your phone to be directed to PayPal services to donate. Likewise, if you prefer the easier way, I prefer it the easier way, there's a link underneath the video presentation where you can click on it and it'll send you, as it were, to PayPal's page to donate. The donation.
Thank you for that word of appreciation. We do appreciate that.
Yes, thank you very much on Rumble, for those of you that commented on Rumble and also on YouTube. So we will gather again on Sunday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, for the next edition of
Preach it
Irrespective.
again, brother.
Until then, may the Lord shine his face upon you.